Major warnings are now going out for multiple cities and multiple states across the country. We have massive fires happening and evacuations being issued. We have new earthquakes happening. We have volcanic eruptions happening. And we also have new deployments of the military. So let's get into all this. You guys can see here, I want to get into this warning for the cities. All right, cities like New York, Chicago, LA, DC are all being issued a major warning right now by President Trump. We're also getting warnings being issued for earthquakes and volcanic activity. We will get into that in just a second, but I want you to listen here what President Trump said, and then we will get into all this other news.
And we're going to have the same thing here. But then I'm going to look at New York in a little while. Let's do this. Let's do this together. Let's see. It's going to go pretty quickly. And if we need to, we're going to do the same thing in Chicago, which is a disaster. We have a mayor there who's totally incompetent. He's an incompetent man. And we have an incompetent governor there. Pritzker's an incompetent. His family threw him out of the business, and he ran for governor. And now I understand he wants to be president. But I noticed he lost a little weight, so maybe he has a chance. You know, you never know what happens. But Pritzker's a gross incompetent guy, thrown out of the family business. But when I look at Chicago and I look at L.A., if we didn't go to L.A. 3 months ago, L.A. would be burning like the part that didn't burn. If he would have allowed the water to come down, which I told him about in my first term. I said, you're going to have problems. Let it come down. We actually sent in our military to have the water come down into L.A. They still didn't want it to come down after the fires. But that was it. We have it coming down. But hopefully L.A. is watching. That mayor also. The city's burning.
All right, so Trump's warning that Chicago is on the list for the National Guard to be deployed. New York is on the list for it to be deployed. It could be redeployed to Los Angeles. They're deploying to Washington, D.C. right now. And he's talking about L.A. Well, there's actually been a massive fire ongoing in L.A. the past week. Look at these images from these fires, and this is actually right outside and right near where these Pacific Palisades fires happened last year. All right, you can see here, this is right outside Santa Clarita. There were big evacuation zones that were ordered and evacuation warnings that were issued right outside. The evacuations are now being lifted because firefighters are getting better control of this fire outside of Los Angeles. But this was a rapidly spreading fire that grew to over 5,000 acres relatively quickly, and evacuations were ordered for thousands of people. All right, so these fires keep popping up for some reason, and they're actually happening all over the country right now. You can see here there's a smoke alert issued near Southern California here, right outside of Santa Clarita, where this fire is. This was the Canyon Fire, and there's also another fire in Southern California, the Gifford Fire, that is a quote mega fire and is over 119,000 acres have been burned. All right, we are also having dozens of fires pop up in Colorado as well too, and evacuation orders have been issued near places like Pagosa Springs. You can see here it says Colorado wildfires. The Oak Fire forces evacuations and threatens 2,000 homes near Pagosa Springs. So for some reason, these fires are just popping up all over the place and spreading rapidly. All right, it's very hot, it's very dry in these areas, and there's been a lot of wind. There's been red flag warnings that have been issued across the country, especially in places like Colorado, California, out west, Arizona. There are hundreds of thousands of acres burning right now. Also, lots of air quality alerts being issued for Minnesota today. You can see here almost the entire state is in the red, which means that everyone should take precautions by reducing outdoor activity and go inside to cleaner air if you have symptoms. All right, so the entire state, if you're seeing the smoke in the air, it's most likely from these wildfires. There's over 450 in Canada alone right now. Look at all these fires. All these little red flames are fires, and these are just the bigger ones. that are being tracked. Even Alaska is having a ton of fires right now, which never makes sense to me, but it's happening. All right. We are also getting new earthquakes and new volcanic eruptions happening. Check this out. We have the Shinmoedake Volcano. This is in Japan. This is in southern Japan. It is now erupting and sending out ash plumes over 3,000 meters, around 9 to 10,000 feet into the air. It says a powerful eruption occurred in the Shinmoedake Volcano in Japan's Kirishima mountain range around 5:23 a.m. local time on Sunday, sending an ash plume soaring more than 3,000 meters above the crater. The volcano, located on the border between the Kagoshima and the Miyazaki prefectures, has been erupting intermittently since June 27th. Ash from Sunday's eruption is drifting northeast and could reach as far as the Takanabe. And it says here that they are warning that moderate ashfall is expected, and they're saying that small volcanic rocks may fall within about 14 kilometers northeast of the crater, according to the Japanese Meteorological Agency. All right, and they're saying that the agency is maintaining the eruption as an alert level at 3, advising residents to stay alert for large volcanic rocks within 3 kilometers of the crater and pyroclastic flows within 2 kilometers. All right, so we're seeing a lot of activity and a lot of eruptions happening along the Pacific Rim and the Ring of Fire, quote, Ring of Fire, that it has been nicknamed due to its excessive earthquake and volcanic activity here. You can see here's some of the latest earthquakes. This is actually where this volcano is erupting here in southern Japan, here near Miyazaki, right, in Kagoshima. You can see down here the volcano is in this area, and this is right along a major fault line, okay? And you can see there's multiple fault lines actually that go right through Japan, so they're always at risk, and they actually issued a, quote, mega quake warning for Japan just a few months ago. The government did, warning people that I believe it was around 800,000 people could lose their life. Maybe it was 300,000. It was in that range. It was in the hundreds of thousands of people could lose their life, and I made a whole video on this a few months ago, so the numbers are a little foggy, and they also warned billions of dollars from their economy alone and the global economy. Tens of billions of dollars could be affected because of Japan's trade partners, cars, industries. There's a lot of different parts that are made in Japan, and the world needs them. Okay, so if they had a mega quake hit, it's not going to be like Russia where it hits this very rurally populated area, and you can see here lots of aftershock quakes are still hitting Russia, lots of 5.2s, 5.1s still hitting the Kamchatka area, and it's not going to be the same as this Russia one where it was bad, but it's relatively, the population is very low compared to Japan, where the population is very dense and everyone is packed into an island, and there's really nowhere to go. There's really not anywhere to evacuate. If there is, you could go higher ground to the mountains, things like that, but there's really nowhere to go, especially if there's any type of big tsunami event. So just something to think about too. Even if it doesn't hit the US, it hits one of our allies or our major trading partners, then it could affect the US economy and could affect global trade as well too, not to mention these volcanic eruptions. If there's a really big one, it could spew so much ash. The plumes could be so high and so dense that air travel to certain areas could be affected and could just be totally cut off. We also had a 5.8 hit here in Dominguez, Mexico, all right, here in southern Mexico near the border of Guatemala. We had a couple earthquakes. So we had a 4.5, we had another 4.5, and also a 5.8 that hit. So pretty significant earthquake hitting Mexico, not somewhere where you typically think of earthquakes happening, but they are happening there. There's also reports people saying that they are still feeling aftershocks in Turkey. And you can see here there was a pretty decent sized earthquake, a 6.1 hit here a couple days ago, and we're still getting 4.1s, 4.0s, 4.4s aftershocks happening. And I saw reports and comments saying that they're still getting shaking in Turkey. They're still feeling it every 30 minutes, every hour. They're feeling the aftershock. So lots of activity here in the Pacific Rim. And you can see here even Alaska is getting hit one after another. I'm surprised that a lot more of this energy transfer has not happened to Alaska yet, but they're getting more activity more consistently now. You can see a 3.2 or a 4.2 in the Aleutian Islands, the outer Aleutian Islands closer to Russia, a 3.4, 4.5, 3.5, a 2.6, and also another 2.6, not too far from Mount Spur, right? Not super close, but not that far relatively for the size of Alaska. Also, we have another 3.0 hitting California and another 2.9 hitting Nevada. All right, so lots of earthquake activity, lots of volcanic activity. We are also getting eruptions at the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii, but it is now stopped erupting. You can see here, this is from the USGS update on the Kilauea volcanic eruption. It says Kilauea is currently not erupting. Episode 30 of the ongoing eruption has ended abruptly at 12:55 p.m. Hawaiian Standard Time on August 6 after 12 hours of continuous fountaining. All right, so we're seeing this pressure being released, and it seems like a bad thing to have a lot of these volcanic eruptions and to have a lot of these small earthquakes, but on the bigger scale and on the longer timeline, this is actually relatively good because this is releasing pressure in the system. This is allowing the pressure from these tectonic plates and from this major adjustment that happened from this 8.8 that hit Russia. We're seeing adjustments happening throughout the world, and especially along the Pacific Rim. We're seeing realignments. We're seeing resettlements. Okay. It's just like your house, your foundation. It settles. It eventually moves. All right. The earth itself, it seems static. It seems like it's not moving the ground beneath you, but it's always moving just a little bit. There's always a little bit of activity going on. Even if it's very, very slow, there's always a little bit of movement happening. And it's actually good that some of this pressure is being released, all right, because we don't want a realignment to be happening in the background, and things are buckling, things are twisting, things are becoming more pressurized and not releasing any of that pressure. Okay, we don't want that's what happened in Russia, right? That's how this 8.8 happened, and all this pressure was released there. Now we're just seeing a ton of pressure continue to be released through these aftershocks as well too. So relatively good thing that we're seeing these smaller ones, seeing these eruptions. It's relieving the internal pressure. But it's also a warning sign that we could be moving into a period of more geological activity, right? I think that's possible. And I think we have lived in a time frame where things have been relatively good and safe. There hasn't been a lot of huge earthquakes. There haven't been a lot of major volcanoes. These things can alter the weather. They can block out the sun for weeks, months, maybe even years if there are continuous eruptions happening. And what does that do for farming? What does that do for global food production, global energy production for things like solar? It's going to be a huge shock to the system if any of these things do happen. And I think we are moving into a period of more increased activity. So just make sure you are prepared. Make sure you're stocked up. right? Make sure you have backups, because infrastructure, if these megaquakes hit, infrastructure could be destroyed, your power could be out, your internet could be out. Even right now, I'm doing this video out here, right? I'm powering it with little off-grid battery here, right? I got my internet plugged into it. I have my satellite internet plugged in, and my computer can plug into it too. It's my computer's on battery right now, but it's gonna need plugged in soon, so I can use this stuff anywhere, right? You can bug out anywhere and still have a internet connection, at least some power to keep your phone going, keep your computer going, stay connected, have updates on what is really going on, right? This is just something I use like all the time because there's no cell service out here on the mountains. I don't know if you guys can really tell. I'm just kind of out here in the woods on the mountains. There's just no cell service. There's too many, ledges and mountains and hills everywhere. It just blocks the signal. It's inefficient. They'd have to have signals or towers every few miles. All right, so there's just no cell phone signal out here, especially when you're out in the woods. And the only way really to get signal and service is with satellite internet. And the only way to have that is some type of power bank or power system. There are ways to plug it into your car, but I like to have this little power battery here, and you can even charge this thing with a little solar panel. All right, so just something to think about, something to look into. No affiliation or anything like that, or anything. That's just what I use personally, right? Because driving around, we have no service, and we like to go camping. We like to be out in the woods a lot, and it's nice to have some service if you need it. All right, charge your phone, whatever you need. Have a backup. So just have these alternatives. All right, guys, you're gonna be thankful you did when it does hit the fan for any of these events. Even if it's just a regular power outage from a storm, you could bust this thing out. You could get your generator out and really be comfortable, right? Not have your food spoil, things like that. There's also alerts being issued from the Alaska Volcano Observatory here. All right, you can see here the Great Sitkin is still erupting. So this is an active volcano that has been erupting for quite a while now in the Alaskan Aleutian Islands, and this is actually not far from Russia over here, right? Where this other 8.8 happened, the Kamchatka Peninsula, sorry about that, and where these other volcanoes are erupting, all right? The Krashenikov and the Kluchevskoy volcanoes are erupting right now in this peninsula, not far from Alaska, all right? So we also have a volcano here erupting in the Great Sitkin, but thankfully nobody really lives here in the Aleutian Islands. Maybe there's a few people out here, but really nobody lives here in this island chain, so it's not really a threat currently, but it's a warning sign that, hey, there's a lot of volcanic activity happening and magma flows are rising to the surface. You can see here a yellow alert has been issued for Spur. Let's just get an update of what's going on. You can see here update for August 11th. Low level unrest continues at Mount Spur with occasional small earthquakes occurring beneath the volcano. Nothing was observed in partly cloudy to clear satellite images over the past day. It says here fluctuations and unrest are common at volcanoes and eruptive activity remains possible but unlikely. All right, so just keep this one in your back pocket. Keep an eye on it, especially if you're in Alaska, all right, because I think it's the one that could be next for the United States. This yellow alert is not going away, and it's an active volcano, right? So I think it's next on the list. I also think potentially Mount Rainier is on the list too, maybe after this, or maybe before, who knows? But I just have a feeling Mount Spur is going to be the next big one that we see, at least in the United States, right? So make sure you guys are staying safe and staying prepared out there, all right? We're getting warnings. If you live out in the country, you live out in the woods, we're getting warnings. There's fires. You're getting warnings. Do not travel. Do not go hiking in the woods. There could be $25,000 fines. We're getting warnings for the cities as well too, right? So it doesn't matter if you live out in the country or if you live in literally New York City, biggest city in the country. It doesn't matter. You're going to be affected in some way from these events that are happening, okay? There's no escape. I've kind of come to the conclusion you can bug out to a certain extent and get away from the chaos, but it's always going to follow you in some way, right? They're going to find you and it's going to affect you, right? So watch out for these fires, right? Especially they are fast moving, fast spreading, and they're covering large swaths and large areas of the country right now, okay? If you're on the West Coast, you need to be on high alert right now because these fires keep popping up, and especially if you're in Colorado, for some reason these fires are expanding, and it's been affecting air quality across the state as well too, right? So have a plan, have an evacuation route to get away from these. But these are some of the most rural places in the country, okay? Nobody really lives out here. Some people live in Durango, okay? But very, very sparsely populated, not dense at all. And they're still having all these fires. Look at these fires, right? You can't escape. There's going to be some type of issue, right? So just make sure you're prepared. And the cities, what we're seeing here is what Trump was warning of is just the level of chaos and the level of societal breakdown that's happening in a lot of these big cities. And you can bet, guys, if there's earthquake activity that can happen in places like New York. Okay, you see these mountains here? These are the Appalachian Mountains, right? There is actually a fault line that runs along the Appalachian Mountains. That's why there's mountains here. And they run all the way up to New York. Okay, let me show you exactly so you can visualize it. The North American craton. Because this is important. This is kind of like the key to it all, at least geologically inside the United States. Once you understand this map, you kind of understand where the earthquakes are happening exactly. Check out this map, the North American craton. So this is the big chunk of earth, okay, the big crust that is relatively stable, and the rest of the country is kind of fused to the North American craton, this brown area here. Okay, so half of the country is kind of just fused to this, and that's why we see geological activity here. Okay, so you can see the accretionary belt on the West Coast. That's why we get a lot of earthquakes here, because there's a lot of movement here, right? But you can also see in New York, like I was talking about a minute ago, this craton, the brown area, it goes all the way up through New York along the Appalachian Mountains. So that's why you can get earthquakes here. That's why there are subduction zones here. There are fault lines. This New Madrid fault line here is right on the edge of this craton in Missouri. Okay, and there's actually been megaquakes over 8.0s that have hit the New Madrid fault line right along here in Missouri. Okay, so, and this happened in the 1800s. So honestly, we are overdue for a megaquake to hit the central part of the country. You typically think of them happening in Los Angeles. If a megaquake hits LA, it's over. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be hitting the fan, and there's going to be a lot of lives lost, right? Sadly, it's going to be tragic. Nobody's really ready for what's going to happen there one day. But places that you don't really think about, middle of the country here, and also places like New York, okay? If a big earthquake did hit there, it's over. It's chaos. People are the bridges are gonna collapse, a lot of them. People are going to be trapped on the island. There's going to be flooding, potentially tsunamis. The city is at sea level here. A lot of it is an island, actually. And the level of societal breakdown that we're seeing now will look like nothing. All right, I know I'm kind of going on like a long rounded point here, but that's my point here, is that okay, we're seeing a breakdown of society now. Okay, and it's like so bad. The president's saying we have to send in the National Guard, we have to do this stuff. Think about what it's going to look like after a mega disaster. I don't know if you've seen these areas like Buffalo, New York. They had a giant blizzard that hit a couple years ago, and there were power outages for weeks. Okay, people were stranded in their cars. It was really bad, and there was actually tons of looting going on. Aldi's were looted, Dollar Generals were looted, Rent-A-Center, rent stores were looted. All these, it was chaos. It was societal breakdown and meltdown, and they had to send in the National Guard to restore order there. That was just from a blizzard, a storm. Imagine if a megaquake destroys critical infrastructure, destroys the supply lines in and out of the cities for people to get in and out as well too. Transportation lines. It's not going to be pretty. So just make sure you have a plan. Make sure you're prepared. I think the best strategy for a lot of these things is just to bug in at least for a couple weeks. All right. But who knows? You might have to bug out at some point as well too. That might be, just be prepared for anything. All right. So thank you guys. I hope you guys are staying safe, staying prepared, staying stocked up out there. I hope you have big blessings for your life and your family. And I hope you have a big old blessed day.